So today we're going to talk about just America and how awesome our country is. We're going to talk about like the Constitution, like the amendments, and just like how lucky we are to live in a country that gives us all the freedom that we do. Because we're the only country in the world that has a guaranteed Second Amendment right and so much coverage for freedom of speech. All 27 amendments and all 10 amendments in the Bill of Rights, all the liberties. So, yeah. So, Ron Swanson, who's seen Parks and Rec? Yeah, so classic Ron Swanson quote, "History began on July 4th, 1776, and everything before that was a mistake." It's pretty true. So, yeah, so trigger warning, but this is a really cool video. This is like, so when people talk about like our founding, how we took the land from the Native Americans, I think this video will give some context to that. Just you'll see. So I included that in there because that's like in the beginning of our country. A lot of people say that we were wrong for taking the land from the Indians and everything. And what do you guys think about that? People usually say like, that's just the way things were back then. Things were different, you know? Do you think, I mean, like, should we give the land back to the Indians? Do you think it was wrong how we stole the land from them? A lot of people say, I'm sure you've heard this argument before, that like America from its inception is an evil racist country. You know, we did this to Indians, slavery and everything. So what do you think about this?
Oh, well, I say no because my friend was talking about how like Ukraine was taken from like not Ukraine, sorry, Crimea was like taken by Russia from like Ukraine or whatever. But then I was like talking, like you were saying like that was so bad or whatever. Then I was saying like it might seem bad, but in actuality, like every country in the entire world like was formed from conflict, like the lines that were drawn. Well, not as much in Africa because those were kind of like made by European imperialism and stuff, but like you know what I mean? Like everything was from conflict. Like all the European countries, like why do you think that Germany and like France and Spain exist? Like why do we have like Catalonia? Like why do we have all these things? It's because like well from way back then it was like the Roman Empire and everything, but everything like split off because of different kingdoms. Like basically just like ruling powers fighting other ruling powers is kind of how every country was formed. So the idea that like the United States is any different is kind of stupid because like literally every country was made that way. So, you know, what do you expect the people to do that came from like England? You want them to just like live nowhere? Like where are they supposed to go when they've already had like tension with the colonial powers? Like how are they supposed like how are you going to say that they're not justified for acting the way that they did, or that they're any more evil than any other country that ever existed, or like group of people? You know, every country's that way. He was pointing out like the dude, like the white dude or whatever. He was pointing out that like, oh, you're just like us. You fought the other people for your land, just like we fought you right now. So it's like everyone does it. It's not like necessary to shame anyone for any group of people for doing that, even though it seems like so barbaric now
Yeah.
because we're in the age of like basically pussies. So which means pusillanimous. It's not a derogatory term towards women. It's literally just means like people that are just weak-minded, like not disciplined. We're nothing compared to the people of the past. In the past, your dad and like uncle, they'll probably be dead from like war and stuff. But nowadays, like we die from chronic illness. You don't die from like battling in the field as much.
Yeah, I definitely nowadays, since like especially since World War II and nuclear weapons,
the testosterone level has gone down to shit like 5 2, which literally just means that we're weaker men than our previous generation.
Less physical labor and everything. I've seen that study also. What do you have to say about it?
Adding on to that, in terms of like justification, I watched this movie a few weeks ago, and it was talking about well, who was evil in terms of, the United States of America or the Japanese, and they were, it came down to it's like, well, perspective, who's evil. It's in our eyes, we seem justified. In their eyes, they seem justified to retaliate and whatnot. And the reality is it comes down to the perspective that like we need certain and basic needs to suffice and to continue to grow and prosper. So
What movie was that?
I do not know. I will have to check my Netflix history.
Was it like World War II?
It
What
might
area?
have been or two like the colors or something like that. We'll get back to you on that.
Oh, that sounds interesting. Anyone else have something to comment? Jasmine?
It's really easy for us, a couple centuries removed from our history, to judge historical figures based on modern standards, and people tend to forget that. Like, it's really easy for us to like call like the people who settled America like, oh, you're savages for doing this, but we're so far removed from like, especially like our generation was so far removed from like any kind of conflict and any kind of war that we forget like that's how things were.
Mhm.
And like even though we have had like wars within our lifetimes, it's like people are so disconnected from like that's how things were, that's how countries were formed, that's how history is made. And so like you can't really say like, oh, these were wrong, because like what Rain was saying earlier, it's like everyone, that's how everyone was, that's
Yeah.
how you protected your family, that's how you built land for yourself.
Yeah.
I agree with that, but at the same time, you can like look back at your mistakes and say they were mistakes. Like obviously, what happened was not okay. Like some of it's justified, but like I've never seen that perspective though of like talking about it. Usually, I just hear like we murder innocent people, but it's not really like that. But I mean, so we just look back and like know like what was okay and what wasn't okay, and we can just learn from it. There's nothing we can do about it now.
Did you guys know that like the Indians, they were literally killing each other? They literally were doing the same exact thing that the white people did to them. Just human history is full of violence like this.
Watching a presentation about like how everyone was saying, hey, we need to get rid of Columbus Day and get rid of all the statues like that, he's a murderer and blah blah blah. But then I saw somebody like just recounting the history of like the types of tribes that Columbus encountered, and a lot of them like there was a tribe called like the Cannibs, and that's where the word cannibal comes from. And there was like tribes that were like murdering people like unprovoked, and like there's a lot of like nuance to what was going on, and it's really easy for us to just take history of like bad guys and good guys.
Yeah.
When it's so much, especially if we like kept records, it's so much more difficult to understand.
Yeah, I didn't know that. Were they like an Indian tribe, the Cannibs?
Yeah, the talk that I watched was about the Cannibs and the Caribs, so that's where like the root of the word cannibal and the root of the word Caribbean is where it comes from. Like that's the part of the world.
Interesting. It sounded something new. All right. Quickly, you two, and then we're gonna have a discussion at the end of the slides also. But you guys can say what you want.
Appreciate it. I think that if you look at the end result, the world is like a pretty damn peaceful place now, all things considered. And if we had just stayed separated for like centuries and centuries, and the Native Americans still had, there was never any like free trade and like emerging resources, they literally just started killing each other with spears and eating kids. I don't think that that would be a better future than what we have now. I think that whatever, supposedly wrong things we did in the past, we built a pretty damn good country, and now like in the history of the world there's less violence now than there's ever been. So I mean, yeah, some pretty terrible things happened in the past, but we live in a pretty great world now. I don't think that the end result was worse than what it would have been. And I think returning it now is not feasible. So let's just be happy for what we have.
So you're saying learn from the past, but just learn from it and improve on it.
Right, and it was really a mistake because we have a pretty good president.
Alex?
Like adding on to that, also we can like look back and before the Indians, who was there, they were I don't remember if it was just the Vikings or the Celts that were there. They were there first. They colonized America in the first place. And then who's to say that the Native Americans conquered them afterwards? Like who's to say that wasn't evil? So looking back at it, like a postmodernist view. So we could say, oh, should the Indians have left it for the Celts um, and the Vikings to just colonize, or is like the cycle of history with colonization and taking over and warring tribes still consistent today?
Real quick.
Oh yeah. Well, I don't know if this is supposed to be like some sort of thing that people like hate for me to say, but like the idea that like groups of people's history really matters is kind of BS. Because like the idea of like, oh, you're black, you're Native American, you're white, whatever, like you're German, you're like Italian, like that's just stuff that we push on each other to like have kind of just ideas that just really don't mean anything at all. Like we're all just humans. It doesn't matter if you were a part of like this in the past or whatever. Like it's kind of that idea that I think about is like, do I really care that like, you know, whatever my ancestry is, because it really has nothing to do with who I am now. Does me being like Italian make me any different than like him being Russian? You know what I mean? How does any of this like really matter? The only thing that really matters is the implications of like how those groups were treated and like how that can impact today. Like for instance, how like blacks often have like a very low like family value for like money and stuff. Like they're a lot more poor because in the past they weren't given the rights. So like it's generally generationally like they got screwed over by the past. Like that's true. But like at the same time, like does it really matter that you're an individual that was born in like a poor situation for like family? Does it really matter? As long as it doesn't impact like the current way that we treat people now, which it probably does, because you know like there's always stigma against groups of people based on like how those groups have been like generalized and stuff. So there are implications, but in reality, like when it comes to Native Americans and whatnot, it's like it's hard to say like how that impacts nowadays. Like I haven't put much thought into it, but that's kind of like my thoughts overall.
When you were talking, I was thinking about, I watched a PragerU video and they were saying how America is special because in every other country, like England, you can be English. That means you're from England. Or you can be German. That means you have German blood. Your ancestors go back hundreds of years.
Exactly.
But America is one of the newest countries on earth. And there is no American. You can be anything and be American. American's not a blood. It's a melting pot. If you're a citizen, you're American. And I think that's really special. You know, anyone can be an American. You don't have to look like anything.
Oh yeah, I just wanted to add to that. That's why I really like when people say like, no matter what they look like, they're like, I'm American. I like that because it kind of disregards the pointless thing like, oh, I'm Italian American. Like I'm this. Like they're not like ethnically they're Italian. It's like they're generations back they're Italian, for instance. Like that really means nothing. So like recognizing that like, oh, I'm an American and like that actually means something because it means like cultural. There's like cultural implications to that, as opposed to like I'm Italian. I'm like whatever. But in reality, like we're not from Italy. You know what I mean? That kind of stuff. So that's why I like when people say I'm American, which I don't even say it that much, but I should probably because it's a very positive thing to like bring people together.
Absolutely, I agree. Okay, so Revolutionary War summed up. So 75 to 83. So take your crown, laws, taxes, troops, and bank, and go blank yourself. Lay down your arms and submit to the crown. Yeah, I don't think so. So that's pretty much how our country came to be. And it's really crazy. Like the British imposed like a 2% tariff or tax on sugar and postage and everything. But now there's some people getting taxed upwards of 50%. You know, imagine what the founding fathers would do if they would be very surprised about how much the government has intruded in our lives. So liberty sets America apart from the world. And so America's special because of these 27 bad boys, especially the first 10. So the first 10 amendments of the Constitution are called the Bill of Rights, and they were the original. They were the original ones, and then all of them, 11 through 27, were added afterwards. But so everyone take a look at this because we're gonna have a Kahoot on the amendments. So just study this, try to memorize them real quick, and see who knows the Constitution the best. Does anyone have any questions on any of these? Our most recent one was the 27th, I think, in 1993. This is Congress can't raise their paycheck within their sitting term. They have to do it the next term. That was a way to like prevent them from getting like giving themselves big pay raises. Yeah.
Can you get rid of amendments?
I think the only way to get rid of one is to just another amendment.
It's like the
18 and
prohibition
21.
and the-
Oh, okay. Because like obviously quartering your troops doesn't really relate anymore.
Say that instead.
Well,
Well, I mean,
Oh, it can. It's 'cause
that's the problem. It doesn't until it does, and then it's a problem.
Maybe it hasn't been like that because of number 3. You know. But yeah, okay. So Ayn Rand, she's a libertarian, objectionist, or she believes in a philosophy called objectivity, and she thinks that she's like she's a libertarian. She doesn't want like any government. She's like an anarcho-capitalist. So she's really interesting. She has a book called Atlas Shrugged. There's a movie on it. I really recommend that movie. It's pretty interesting. She's very big and like, she's kind of like George Orwell. And she always talks about how if the government gets too big, you know, that would be the end of us. It would be scary, it'd be dystopian. And what's been happening recently with, and just to repeat, Turning Point doesn't endorse candidates, but just to talk about the emails, the Hunter Biden emails, I think it's crazy how the media, Twitter and Facebook blocked the story. They wouldn't let, you couldn't talk about it, and they blocked it all. Isn't that crazy? That's like literally George Orwell. They didn't. Anyone have just quickly something to say on that? You guys know what I'm talking about? The emails, they blocked it.
And now people are calling for the Truth and Reconciliation group.
Yeah.
Or if you prefer, the Ministry of Truth, depending on how you think about it.
Right, isn't the same thing, right? Okay. So in America, we value, the Constitution values the individual more than the majority. So we're more individualistic versus collectivist. So the point of the Constitution, there's 2 points. It's to give people rights, and then also, just as importantly, it's to prevent the government from infringing on the rights. So it gives rights and it prevents the government from infringing on the rights, and it also protects the minority from the majority. Yeah. So just kind of like what I just said, Ayn Rand said, the Constitution of the United States is not a document that limits the rights of man, but it's a document that limits the power of society over man. So it ensures that we have certain inalienable rights, freedom of speech, owning a gun, all the amendments, or especially the first 10. So more of Ayn Rand. So this is Isabel Brown. She's awesome.
Young Americans are frequently fed a narrative that America is a terrible place to live. That could not be further from the truth. I feel deeply grateful to live in the greatest nation on earth each and
it's in
every
Chinese.
day. And here are 5 reasons that you should too. 5. Our constitutional framework was built around the concept that our rights come from something greater than ourselves. Our founding fathers understood that government does not have the power or capacity to give and take human rights away. They lie within us. Thanks to our United States Constitution, the most brilliant political document ever written, no power-hungry tyrannical ruler can take our most basic rights, like that of freedom of expression, freedom to protect ourselves, and insulation from a too powerful government away. 4. We have the freedom to disagree with one another and with those in power, and have the legal capacity to voice that disagreement. Freedom of speech protected by the First Amendment is a constitutional right here in America, but our reality is not the global norm. Countless individuals all over the world face punishment or even death for speaking their mind and lack the freedom to express themselves in whichever way they choose that we often take for granted here in the United States. When this fundamental human right is not protected due to a tyrannical government, the people often inevitably risk everything, even death, to express themselves. We are truly grateful to have the legal capacity to speak our minds each and every day. 3, Americans have one of the highest standards of living in the world. According to Pew Research, 9 in 10 Americans have a standard of living that was above the global middle income standard, compared to just 13% of people worldwide that fall into that same standard. We stand heads and shoulders above the rest of the world when it comes to standard of living. That's not a bad thing, by the way. We simply have a greater opportunity to give back to our local and global communities with more disposable income than many around the world, a privilege and responsibility we can take advantage of. 2, our nation is founded and centered around diversity. We are the melting pot of the world. Being an American is not based on biology, it's based on nationality. Americans make up a diverse landscape of racial and ethnic backgrounds. We look different, we speak different languages, and we celebrate different religions and holidays. Yet we are all American, despite the many differences between us. Our founders called this principle e pluribus unum, out of many, one. Our differences could divide us, but instead we are united in the fact that we are all Americans, and that is a beautiful thing. 1, the American dream is alive and well. The fabric of our nation is built on the principle that if you work hard, you will create a better life for yourself, your children, your grandchildren, and every generation to come. Ask anyone around you if their standard of living is better than their grandparents'. Chances are the answer is yes. The American dream allows us to create opportunity out of nothing but our own imagination and drive to succeed, improving our own lives and the world around us. I am truly thankful to be an American, and you should be too. I'm Isabel Brown for PragerU.
Thank you for watching this video. To help keep PragerU videos free, please consider making a tax-deductible donation.
Yeah, so PragerU is awesome.
Are they an actual university? I don't
No, they just call themselves that because they have like 5-minute educational videos to teach people. What did you guys think of that video? Anything stand out to you? Well, besides Isabel, any like content? What's your name? Alec. What's up?
So I really like 3 and 5. The first, and I'll talk, and then the first one is American is not biology, but nationality.
Mm-hmm.
And then also, that means the last one, Americans are free to pursue a better life. And I really think now more than ever we need to focus on that, because I think we tend to stray away from that and, let our emotions, control us based on like diversity and race is a big one. And I think we need to come back, to the basics of it's nationally first. I think the student from the left stated that it's not diversity or race. We are all, Americans. We are based on nationality, and if we can remember that and keep up to that, we can really create opportunities out of nothing. We can do better than the past or our previous generation. I think that's what really stuck out to me, that we do have the opportunity now more than ever, even if we have to work twice as hard from where we come from, to be better.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's one of the most important points in the video. And on all of our coins, it says e pluribus unum, which means out of many one. And that's like one of the main themes of America. So out of many one, meaning like out of one America, like we're all Americans. Doesn't matter what your sex is, what your what your race is, your sexual orientation, like anything. It doesn't matter. And that ties back to like what you said and then what I said earlier. Like when you're English people have like English blood, it goes back hundreds of years, and Germans have German blood, but in America we're a melting pot. So that means out of many, one American people. So you can thank these guys for the amazing country we live in, our founding fathers. So yeah, Thomas Madison was talking about how the Constitution not only gives people rights, but it also prevents the government and people from hurting the minority. So the Constitution was really well thought out. Just all the amendments they put in there, the Bill of Rights, it was really just to prevent the government from infringing on our rights, because they left England to escape the tyrannical English government. So they came here and they're like, we're not going to let this happen again. So very focused on individual freedom. Yeah, very wise men. This, we can get into a whole debate about this quote and the current situation with the coronavirus. It could have been, the coronavirus could have been a great excuse for the government to just come and take away all of our rights. And thankfully that hasn't happened, but it always can happen, you know. And a pandemic, what better reason for the government to come in and say, we need to just, for your own safety. I think Thomas Chip, there's a quote by, I think, I forgot the founding father, but he's like, freedom, taking away people's freedom and so like for their own safety is stupid. That was a bad paraphrase. That I think it's gonna. I don't have it in here, but it was like that. So yeah, and then quick note: Second Amendment. It's not just to be able to shoot the intruder who comes into your door. It's for self-defense. It's for all of those things, but it was mostly for if the government becomes too powerful, it's for the citizens to keep them in check and to fight back. That's the true point of the Second Amendment.
And two, especially like with the whole like pandemic thing going on, I feel like most of you probably don't live on campus and like don't know how that whole system works, but I do. And if it has shown me nothing else, is that the government really should like have no business with like it's literally exactly what like that quote just said. It's like taking away people's rights for their own safety. Like y'all know how much it is to live in these dorms and to pay rent on that stuff. And if not even if you test positive, but if someone you know tested positive and told them and told like testing place whatever that they need you, they can deactivate your key fob and quarantine you in like a dorm on campus or maybe go off campus or something like that. And that's, I'm not gonna curse, but like, if that doesn't show you that like if you give them an inch they'll take a mile, then I don't know what else will. And the idea that like this is happening on such a small, easily like I work in the Department of Housing, and that's like such an easy change to make, and it took them so like there's so much red tape and so much other things like that we have to go through to like change how that process works. Seeing that happen on a federal level inefficiently, couldn't be me. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, good point. Anyone else have something to say? Yeah. So the founding fathers are very wise. Jasmine, you have to.
We were founded in an idea that of natural rights. Our founding was the first political revolution where the winners voluntarily gave up political power. They could have created a Washingtonian, Hamiltonian, and Franklin ruling class because that's all people knew back then. They voluntarily gave up power and said, what if we try something fundamentally different to give the power back to the people? So I like to say I'm the luckiest 25-year-old ever to live in this country, to experience what I've experienced and to see what I've seen. And I say something every single day. I say I'm so thankful to live in this country. I'm going to do everything I possibly can to save it. And only in America could an 18-year-old with no money, no connections, and no idea what he was doing start something like this that now is on 1,300 campuses across the country. Only in America is that possible. In Bulgaria, in Ukraine, in Bolivia, no other country could that possibly happen.
So that was last year. So now I think we have 2,000 chapters all across the country, even in high schools. They're in colleges and high schools. And so Charlie founded this organization when he was 18 years old. Isn't that crazy? He found this guy named Bill Montgomery, who just recently passed away a couple months ago. But he liked Charlie and he believed in him and he gave him money. And he, only in America, an 18-year-old can do all this. It's pretty cool. This is a funny video.
Hell yes, we're gonna take your AR-15, your AK-47.
Welcome to the rice field, mother. Drop it. Oh, hey. I'm gonna take your AR-15.
Yes, AR-15 salesman.
Hell yeah, we're taking your AR-15.
So
What just happened?
that's what happens when you try to take Americans' guns and you mess with their freedoms. That's exactly what that was. Okay, so we'll have a little discussion, then we can play a Kahoot game. Johanny, want to lead the discussion?
All right. So that was a good conversation and discussion about like our amendments and our rights and the Constitution and such. But here are the questions I have for you guys after listening to all of that. Do you think that the government right now has overstepped their like initial role and purpose, like how they were started in society at this point in any ways?
Yeah, there's like a lot of ways. I mean, is it supposed to be like pandemic specific or?
It could be, but it could just be in general too.
All right. Well, if it's in general, then yeah, I think it has overstepped what it's initially been made to do because there's plenty of like programs that you could easily make an argument for the facts that they're not supposed to be there. Like you could say that our police force is an example of like, I mean, yeah, they protect people, but in a lot of ways you could say that they could be infringing on our rights if they're like doing laws that if they're what's it called if they're carrying through like laws that are not constitutional. So like drug laws, right? Where is it saying that you're not allowed to do drugs in the Constitution from the beginning? And then the police arrest people for stuff like weed and other stuff all the time, and that's not hurting anyone except possibly the user. And so that's just like one example of how the police force could be bad. Another example would be like military that's not just meant for like the self-defense of our country. You can make an argument because it's kind of up in the air whether it's like for the betterment of our country as a whole mostly, or if we're just like using it to get involved in stuff that we shouldn't be involved in. You could also say like there's like so many things that you could argue against the government. Like I don't think about it that much, but like the most thing for me is like drug laws are pretty dumb in my opinion, especially ones where it's like, oh, the FDA has to do so many steps to get pharmaceuticals out there. It's good that Trump is doing the thing where he's basically allowing the the drug administration, whatever part of the government, to like let things go faster for the pandemic, that kind of thing. I'd also say that like probably in California or something, I heard something about like mask wearing, but in reality, mask wearing doesn't do anything unless it's an N99 or N100 mask. These masks actually make you more susceptible to getting the virus, less susceptible to giving the virus out if you have it. But I already had the virus, so I'm not going to be giving it out to anyone because I have antibodies because I don't have an immune compromised, like I'm not immune compromised, so my T cells will actually keep the antibodies rather than the people that they use, the small anecdotes of the people that get reinfected with complete garbage immune systems because their genetics are just bad for immune systems, so their T cells don't work properly, and then they're like, oh, you're gonna get reinfected. No. Well, and then on top of that, there's the government being like, oh, we can fine you for this. Oh, we can give you our blood. Like, you don't even understand science, but we can be like, oh, wear a mask when it doesn't actually do anything. The surface area is greater. You're more likely to get infected wearing one of these. The government, plenty of times, like they'll have just dumb things where they'll just like pull people over, and then they'll act like the cops will. This is a very like small amount of people, but like there's plenty of times where people have like been reaching for their license and then a cop just kills them on the spot because they acted like it was somebody like reaching for a gun. For instance, like some guy was in a car accident right in front of a cop, and as he's leaving his vehicle, the cop just shot him dead right on sight. And so that's another example because that's the police being irresponsible and overstepping their bounds. So I'd say like law enforcement is an example of the government just enforcing laws that don't completely benefit the people that it's supposed to. Like, why are we arresting somebody for doing psychedelic mushrooms and just like and trying to open their mind up to more experiences? Oh, it's because our country's stupid. There.
Okay, yeah. I agree with that.
Okay.
So like another example is like in New York, they require you to wear masks. It's a mandate. And like when I go home, like I have to quarantine, and like they like watch you and they track you, and like that is such an overstep. Like that, I hate it. And like my neighbors are super nosy and they'll report me if I don't do it. So it's like such an overstep of any of my rights. So
How do they track you?
Well, they have like I don't know if you know, they have like trackers, like people that like are from the health department, and like anyone can sign up. And my neighbor's one, so she like gets information of like when I come home. Like she knows I go to Florida. Yeah, and so like she reported my sister, and like it's and like your phone too. If you update it to like 14 whatever, I don't know what it's at now. I haven't updated it, but they can track you for tracing and like yeah. So it's just really like that's such an overstep. But besides that, I feel like America's really in check from other countries.
Right. Okay.
I mean, I think that like the general role of government and the reason why we like elect politicians and why we have like our local and state governments is for them to like protect the interests of their constituency and to like do what's best for the people that live. Like, that's what we elect them for, to like do what's in our best interest. So when they pass laws and make decisions and stuff that are the opposite of that, that is by definition overstepping their role. Like if you're not doing what we hired you to do as tax-paying citizens, what are we hiring you for? So like when I see like the federal government being all up in arms about like getting involved in like another foreign war or like doing something else with another country, I'm like, okay, but we have. Or when I see like Nancy Pelosi talking about all the stuff that we need to do with like the World Health Organization and stuff like that, I'm like, okay, but you have people in your freaking district that are like homeless on the street. So like you need to like do your job before you start trying to do all this extra stuff. So like that's like kind of where I'm at right now. Where it's like it's not even that they're like overstepping their boundaries, like infringing on our rights, but it's like they're not doing what we hired them to do.
Yeah, but then people get misinformed and they keep electing them. And, like,
it's almost like we need a term limit for like every position or something.
Yeah.
There's also like a lot of unequal transparency between the government and the public. Like for example, they've overreached and they basically monitor us 24/7, like with our phones, for example, like Wayne was talking about. The other night we were listening to like a Joe Rogan Experience thing with Robert Snowden, and he was like talking about how the government like works with these phone companies and all this stuff, the 5G towers and stuff to
basically track our locations and our movement patterns. And basically everything that we do can be monitored with a little camera hole that we have in our phones that we probably already knew about. But we do not even know, like, we're at the tip of the iceberg knowing what they actually like are doing in the government right now. Like the conflicts that's going on over there. We don't know, I guess, like 98% of what's going on over there. They just tell us certain things, I feel like, that makes us feel safe or whatever, that they're doing it in our best interest, but there are always like ulterior motives with a lot of things, and it's been proven throughout history that there's a lot of hiding from us, so kind of unequal transparency.
Oh yeah, you could also argue that just like the structure of the government, like forcing you like at birth, you I mean, some people might have like seen this. I saw somebody talking about this online. They were saying like basically they always talk about like the Illuminati and stuff, but and like how they like sell their soul for like power and stuff. But when you're born, you have a birth certificate, and you're basically forced to be in society. And like I get it, like that's kind of just how like we are as humans. Like we set up structures for each other. But like if we really were about freedom and all this stuff, then why is it that we have to force people into all these structures that society is like, oh, you go to school, oh wait, school's kind of like a lot different than you'd expect. I mean, we were talking with our boy like 2 meetings ago, Browning was talking about like school being kind of different than a lot of people might think, and all those things you kind of buy into with society, and that's kind of forced upon you basically. Like, you know, I'll be sitting here like second guessing why have I even decided to go to college, for instance, like kind of what everyone does, you know, and all of this stuff that I've kind of been pushed into, and it's always time for questioning, I guess, because of that.
So yeah, you want to respond?
So I want to respond to what you said earlier on law enforcement, things like that. And I don't think I really agree with your interpretation on that, because it seems like you believe that law enforcement is responsible for effectively determining what the laws are. They carry out the laws, but it's not true that they decide, you know, they shouldn't be the people who decide those types of things. So one of the things that Amy Coney Barrett said, so, and also getting a phone call right now too, with the timing. That's my roommate probably asking me whether I'm dead or not. I don't leave the house normally. So, anyways, but what Amy Coney Barrett said was that the job of a Supreme Court justice is to interpret the law as it is written and not change the law or make policies. That's the job of Congress, right? In the same way, the job of our police agencies is to enforce the law as it is written and not change or modify that. And I think if you take a look at the case you mentioned of someone apparently in a car accident and getting shot by the police, you know, one, there seems to be a lot of information missing from that, to understand, but that too, it also doesn't represent law enforcement in the same way that if you have someone goes and shoots something up, they don't represent society as a whole either, right? And so if you say that the action of one person represents the organization as a whole, that's when you start getting into these arguments that law enforcement is systemically racist and that our country is built on ideas that are systemically racist. And that no matter what we do, these organizations that we have are forever doomed to repeat that cycle. And no matter what we try or no matter what we attempt, the only way to solve that is to raise everything to the ground and start over again. And that I see as the maybe slightly extreme, but I think very logical conclusion to that train of thinking, and I can't agree with that.
Oh, well, I'm never expecting a system to be at that level. I think that one of the parts of the logical conclusion that you were drawing is that there has to be a perfect system. I mean, I'm never calling for there to be a perfect system, but I will point out the fact that there's pretty much always going to be a case where we're taking away the rights of people because we're having like a structured society, you know. And the thing with the person that got shot, the police officer got away with it because he said it was just an accident. Like there was literally no info at all. The guy wasn't not like a criminal or anything. It was just the police officer just like instinctively shot the guy on accident, and it just happened. And so that's an example of the government taking away our rights. But it's an accident, yes. It's not facilitated by like structure we have. For instance, like when cops do stuff that are bad, is that the government doing it? Like, is that the government doing it? Technically, yes, but is the government trying to facilitate that? No. So like, I'm not ever expecting these to be perfect, but I'm pointing out that when you give people power, and give people things like power over other people, there's always going to be the mistakes that happen and that kind of stuff. So yeah, so I see what you mean, like the logical conclusion that like, oh yeah, if we want to go to the forgot what the Latin word was for it, but like to the extreme or whatever, then yeah, I understand that makes sense. We can't just criticize something and provide no answer, you know. So yeah, I understand.
And I think it's a difficult situation in that regard. And one of the fundamental ideas of being conservative in a sense is how do you approach the line that you do not cross, right? So I think there's clearly a point, and you might disagree on what that point is, where there is a line, and if you go past that, it's too far, right? And so the question is it better to approach that line and never reach it, or is it better to risk going over that line and then be able to go backwards from there if it's gone too far? Yeah. And I think that's the general conservative versus more progressive type approach to policies. And so what I will say on that is the quote earlier by I don't remember who, but that these freedoms, once taken away, cannot be restored.
All right. So like on that note though, do you think like are there any amendments or rights that we have right now that are at risk of being taken away, and like should they be?
And number one is freedom of speech.
Right. Yeah.
It's like what's been going on with like Facebook and Twitter and all of these like social media platforms where they're in this weird, shouldn't be a gray area. They're like, oh, we're just a platform, but we don't but we have their individual policies. So like they can silence speech, but they can't silence free speech. It's like this weird kind of, I don't know. But kind of this is like kind of in between that question just asking the second question. I personally think that the most important amendment is first. Yeah. And a lot of people will be like, well, the second is most important because it protects the first. But in my opinion, it's way easier to own a gun illegally than to speak freely illegally. So like I'm not allowed to have a gun on campus in my dorm if I live on campus. Who's gonna come and check in my room? Like who's gonna do that? Yeah. But if I was out like in Turlington, like saying like I think that the university sucks, I think that we have a bad government, I think that we have a terrible president, and that was against university policy, that would be so much more difficult to maintain that freedom. So like when I see like stuff on Twitter like people shadow banning, what was it, New York Post or something? Like there was like a whole article that like you literally couldn't post it, and just seeing how these like CEOs, how they like talk, or how the people in charge of all these companies are like saying like, well, we're not actually silencing people, and you can't just like I feel like they're like what Blake was saying earlier, where it's like where's the line? Should we cross it or not? Them like just tiptoeing really close to it to see how far they can go without people noticing. I think that's really dangerous. I don't think like platforms like the social media platforms should have that power. But then you see people who are saying, well, on the other side you have like in other countries like really like radical groups. Like you talk about like people who are like legitimately like trying to like murder like other ethnic groups in their country, and like you see all these like different like kind of political and like civil wars going on in other countries, and basically it's like, well, we silence those groups on their platform, so why can't we silence hate speech like everywhere? And it's like I feel like at a certain point you just kind of have to like call a spade and just be like, which one are you? Like what like you guys just be clear about it.
Yeah.
So for context, I have a computer science background and minor background in law and things like that. So these types of ideas of large companies and what they not only can do but have done is incredibly concerning to me for a large number of reasons. It's kind of one of my forefront interests in that regard. And I think from both a societal and legal perspective, we don't know how to do that, right? It's something where we have new technology, and we kind of say this like with phones and other things like that. Like we haven't learned how to live with this technology in a way that's effective for us. And I think that might not be super true, but in the sense of these large companies, I think that might be much more accurate. In the sense that we don't understand the consequences of things like Twitter or Facebook, where it's not just a newspaper that's local, or a newspaper that's distributed
nationally that a limited number of people agree, but it's something that anyone can instantaneously say something that can go worldwide, and there's nothing that can be done to almost kind of check that, right? And I say nothing that can be done to check that, not in the sense of restricting the free speech, but in the sense that things spread at a much larger rate than ever previously. And so there are real consequences to that, the solutions of which I don't think are restricting it, but we do need to address how that's handled when it comes to that type of censorship. Because when you're dealing with that type of censorship, then now it starts becoming selective of this broadcast globally, and that's where we end up doing it. Yeah.
Yeah, I was watching, it was kind of like a comp side view of like how we do our patent laws and how like these multinational like kind of social media kind of companies work, and like how it works with different governments being able to like ask the company for like your text message history and be able to say like, oh, well, we can like get a warrant to see what your text messages are and all that kind of stuff, and just talking about how those laws work and how like the programs work with like encrypting your data and stuff like that. And it is a really difficult thing to do, especially like when you have countries like the United States who are like founded on like individuality and like freedom of speech, interacting with people who are like in China, who are like in Hong Kong, who are getting like dragged across the border when they say something that's against the government. Like it's especially if the company is like an American company, I feel like we should err on the side of freedom, but it's difficult to kind of like, now that things have become more globalized and like crossing international borders and with different laws in different countries, it's a difficult situation to handle. But it's very disheartening to see that companies that are made in America by Americans, mainly used by Americans, like if you go on Twitter or on Facebook or anything like that, the likelihood that you'll see something about the politics of Nigeria, few and far between. You see more people talking about like American politics and stuff like that. So it's really disheartening to see that like companies mainly used by Americans, made by Americans, are not erring on the side of American like, principles and like American ideology.
All right, yeah.
Can I propose a question if I may?
We're actually
we have to move on to the Kahoot.
I love having these intellectual discussions, though, and we can continue it after the meeting. But now we're going to move on to Kahoot to exercise your little brains.